Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones, and we're back. We had a week off, Eddie, and we're going to get everybody caught up on the World Cup of Hockey. We got some things we guessed right, some things we didn't guess right, so we'll cover that. We'll talk about Ducks camp. It's the Ducks season is about to get started soon. We got the preseason coming up here, and we're going to talk about what happened at the training camp and what's going on with Lindholm and Rakell, and we have some injury news and other player news. So we're going to get to all of that, plus some league news, and we'll get you caught up on all of that and talk about our contest. We have a lot of tickets that we're going to give away. We'll mention those at the end of the show. But first, let's get back to the World Cup of Hockey here, Eddie. We've got the final coming up here. And it's Team Canada against Team Europe, and kind of a surprise on one side. We expected Canada to do well, and they went far, obviously, and they're in the final matchup here. But Team Europe surprised and ended up beating Team Sweden to get into this matchup, Eddie.
Yeah, and when we were previewing the groups before, we said, there's a chance Team Europe could surprise and grab second from either the U.S. or Canada. And obviously, the U.S. had a terrible tournament, and Europe was able to capitalize and take that second spot, only losing to Canada. So, I mean, it's great for them. And really, when they moved on, we're like, okay, this is probably as far as they can go. They're going to have to play either Russia, Sweden, or North America at the time. And then obviously they go in against Sweden, who topped their group and looked really, really good in all the games that they played. Even the loss they had in overtime against North America, they played a good game there, and they shocked them and win in overtime. And now they got to go and play Canada, and obviously Canada is the huge favorite, winning all their games so far and looking pretty dominant in every game that they've played. But it's a best of three, and the way Europe's been upsetting everybody, they've got a chance to win this whole thing, and I don't think anybody would have predicted that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting the way it worked out. I mean, in the different brackets and whatnot, and the way Russia was able to win that tiebreaker over North America, because essentially they beat them head to head. So that was a little bit of a surprise there, because we thought North America was another one that would go up there, Team Sweden. But I would have to say in this whole thing, Eddie, the biggest disappointment has to be Team USA. I mean, not even winning a game, Eddie, and the blame game went around after that. Everybody was talking about, towards YC, the coach, and the lineup, and that they were so focused on beating your team, Team Canada, and it almost seemed like Team USA just forgot about everybody else. I mean, there's a lot of teams in this competition. It's not just US against Canada. I mean, obviously you and I focus on that because that's where we're from. But I think Team USA, I think they just lost focus, Eddie. I think that that's the reason why they were the biggest disappointment in this whole tournament so far.
Yeah, and even with Finland going 0-3, it's not as a big of a disappointment, at least in the general standing. You look at the teams that they're facing, Russia, North America, Sweden. I think we'd all said that those were better teams in any way. But U.S. was expected to at least grab second, if not challenge Canada for first in the group. And they couldn't even, get a consolation prize and beat the Czechs, and they finished, 0-3 in the group. And yeah, it has to be the disappointment. I mean, maybe even a bigger surprise than Team Europe making the final is the U.S. not even winning a game and really being competitive in the games that they played in. So, I mean, they lost 3-0 to Europe, 4-2 to Canada. They lost 4-3 to the Czechs. That was the closest game that they played in. So, I mean, disappointing for them. A lot of criticism towards, obviously, the coach and the general manager and the roster that was put together. I mean, we saw a tweet from Phil Kessel, who was also critical of the lineup that was put together, too. So, a huge disappointment for them, and really probably the biggest surprise of the tournament.
Yeah, in that tweet, I'll read that for everybody now in case you didn't see that. I thought it was kind of funny, the tweet, but then obviously afterwards some of the players weren't happy about it. And we'll get into that a little bit, but basically that night when the U.S. wasn't doing well and they lost to Canada and ended up we basically knew they were done. Phil Kessel tweets out, quote, just sitting around the house with my dog, felt like I should be doing something important, but couldn't put my finger on it, end quote. And, obviously it got 75,000 retweets. So, no, I'm sorry, 7,500 retweets. So, it blew up and it went on from there. And, obviously Kessel, if you, beat San Jose in the Stanley Cup final with Pittsburgh. And obviously, had some choice words back towards Toronto and their media. So, of course, he takes the opportunity now to say something. And some of the USA players got upset about this, Eddie, but he came out and said it wasn't about that at all. It's just, obviously he felt that the roster could have been a little bit different, and it would have been nice to have that opportunity to play. So, I thought it was humorous, but I guess some of the players didn't, Eddie.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a funny tweet. I can see where the players would be frustrated with it. Obviously, they've played their hearts out in the tournament. They wanted to win, and it's disappointing to see a guy who wasn't invited to camp be critical of the players who did play there. He was, not to say even if he was on the team, if they were going to do any better. If not, I think it was just the whole approach by the U.S. team in general. So I could see where the players come from, but let's be honest, it was a funny tweet. Like it was pretty funny to see that. I think a lot of people were surprised when he initially was left off the roster with his impact for the Penguins in the playoffs. But it is funny. I mean, you saw quotes from Stepan and Parise and even Palmieri and how they were reacting to the tweet, and most of them were negative. So a couple guys understood it wasn't meant to be taken in that way, but all in all, it was a funny tweet, and it probably made a lot of U.S. fans' nights, even though they were out of the tournament. So.
Yeah, that's for sure, Eddie. And with that, I mean, all that's left now is Canada and Europe. They're going to be playing today, and they're going to have the way it works is it could be 2 games or 3 games essentially. It's a 3-game playoff basically, and if somebody wins 2, then they're the winner. So it could end that way. So we'll just have to stay tuned and see. Obviously, Canada is the favorite to win this. Europe is the underdog. As you had mentioned before, we had talked about them making a surprise to get into in the group to advance the second round. And then obviously they've gone all the way to the final. So it'll be interesting to see. I still think Canada's going to win. And with that, the Ducks camp started this last week. And it was kind of a different feel, Eddie, because, with this World Cup of Hockey going on, we have a lot of the Ducks players, 10 players that went to the tournament. Obviously, 9 participated. Rakell, which we'll get to, didn't play. And we'll talk more about that. But you had all those players go. You had Ducks camp open up last week on Friday. It was a little bit of a different feel, Eddie. It was kind of strange because you didn't have most of the starting lineup there. It's just it's different, Obviously, Gibson, Botnan, and Kessler, they came back over the weekend because their teams were one of the first ones eliminated. And everything, but it was just a different feel, Eddie. It's just kind of interesting, and we'll get into some of the fan questions, but it's really going to affect the Ducks lineup here and how it's going to go maybe this preseason.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys are going to have to rest, like you said. We've seen it. Obviously, Rakell probably won't feature, at least in the early on, with him having to rest since having surgery, and we're not sure what Lindholm's going to do. Obviously, coming back from recently playing with Sweden, and his contract issues still, obviously being an issue for the Ducks. And then you look at Getzlaf and Perry, who's still at the tournament. And Kessler coming back from the tournament, and other guys. I mean, they're going to have to rest, and the first few games we could be seeing a lot of ice time for some guys like Shea Theodore and Brandon Montour and Nick Ritchie until some of these guys get back and ready to go. And I'm not against that. I mean, the preseason is about seeing what rookies are able to step and play. Obviously, you want to see some of the main guys get in and get game ready, but I think the World Cup of Hockey almost is a bit of a preseason for these guys, and it's almost better than the preseason because they get to play against best versus best. I'm sure we'll see them feature later on. There is 7 games, so I'm sure they'll feature at some point. Maybe not Getzlaf and Perry, just because if this does go to 3 games, that takes it into October. So I mean, I'm not sure if they'll feature in any of them, or if not, maybe just a couple. But it's always a good thing when you get some of these guys to get more ice time. Obviously, Shea Theodore is going to be fighting for a spot. We already talked about Nick Ritchie as well. He's going to be fighting for a spot, and some of these other guys who are kind of on the borderline, like Montour and some others. So I think it's a good chance for them right now to step up and show that they belong on their opening night roster.
Yeah, and that's basically, they had a scrimmage on Monday at 10 o'clock at Anaheim Ice. And it was interesting because, in the scrimmage, it basically was all these newer players like you're talking about, or the younger guys, Theodore, Richie. You had Hackett in goal, you had Boyle in goal, Tokarski. I mean, you had, all those newer players or players that have been pretty much with the goals basically playing in this game, which there was Team Orange, there was Team Black. Team Orange ended up winning 4-2. Richie had a goal, and there you talked about him. That was probably one of the more highlighted plays that he had throughout that contest. Camarosa also scored a goal for Team Orange. Tyler Soy, he had one as well. And, it was a good match, but it was just interesting because it was almost like a rookie camp because none of the main guys on the starting lineup were in that. They were practicing, on the other rink, but it's just different feel. And it's going to be, very interesting to see what happens. Nick Cordelius was injured in that rookie game against Colorado, so he's out. The Ducks provided an update on him and said that he is not going to practice. He's got concussion-like symptoms. So with him out, as you mentioned, Eddie, there's more opportunity for these players to step up. And that's kind of what a lot of our fan questions this week. We had Melissa asks us, who's going to be called up to the Ducks from the goals, and how the scrimmage go, which we just talked about a little bit. But I think there's a lot of room for all kinds of players to come up. I really think it's mainly going to be on the offense, obviously. And we'll have to see what happens on the defense too. But with Rakell and Lindholm out, we'll talk about them in a little bit. If you look at the offense, I mean, you're talking about Camarosa could come up, Case, Nason, Sarbosa. I would have said Cordelius until he got hurt. So there's a lot of forwards that can come up because when you look at this Ducks lineup and the forwards, you look at the top 6 forwards. You're talking about Cogliano, Kessler, Getzlaf, Perry, and Silverberg. Those are really the top 6 guys that the Ducks have for sure. And we don't even know if the Kessler's line is going to stay together. But, I mean, those are 5 of the guys that you would assume would be in the top 6. After that, everybody's the bottom 6, Eddie. I mean, Mason Raymond could come up in there. Obviously, Nick Ritchie too. But it's going to be interesting with Rakell out. There's a lot of room, especially on the forward side of the ice.
Yeah, and that's what's disappointing about Nick Cordelius going down because he was one of the guys we expected to get a lot more, ice time this year and a chance at making the roster out of camp or coming up during injuries or anything like that. And it's disappointing to see him go down with another injury and especially another concussion, which is something of a trend for him as of late, which is obviously disappointing to see at any time in your career. But early on, I mean, it's hopeful that it isn't a concussion, that we can see him come back as soon as possible and maybe get some games with the Ducks this year. But obviously it's going to be something that they monitor closely. But like you said, it does give some opportunities to say Nick Ritchie, Nason, Scarbosa, all those guys, even Corey Trapp, who might not start the season up with the Ducks as well. So it gives options to these guys, and it is nice to see. I mean, not all of them are going to take advantage of those options, and it would be nice to, to have some established guys, and of course to have Rakell back and ready to go. But if not, hopefully some of these guys can come up and make their chances. Obviously, Nick Ritchie, we expect him to make the team out of camp. He would be a guy that you expect to step up this year. And then Stefan Nason too. I think those are going to be the 2 big guys to make an impact out of camp. But like you said, Scarbosa could come up and play a role. And a couple other guys too. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Come the first game.
Yeah, and that's another, leads us to another fan question. We had Brandon. He asked, does Murray want to use the guys from the goals to fill the roster? And I don't really think it's a matter of what Murray wants, Eddie. I really think the Ducks are going to have to use players because right now you got Lindholm and Rakell are still up in the air, which we'll cover in a minute, and you're going to have to fill in these spots. I mean, Cordelius out. You could have Theodore or Montour come up and play if Lindholm doesn't get his deal done. On the forward situation, they're going to have to put in some players. I think the Ducks have to use players in the goals, Eddie. I don't really think it's what Murray whether he wants to or not. I just think it's a must right now.
Yeah, I mean, you have to fill those spots, and obviously we're not sure even if Lindholm and Rakell are going to play without contracts. I mean, they have until December 1st to sign a contract. Similar situation to Jacob Trouba and Winnipeg, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But, if they don't play, that opens up even more holes. And, yeah, like you said, you have to bring guys up. And even right now, you have to bring guys up to replace them. And it all depends, who you bring up, what type of player you need. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be opportunities. There could be opportunities on defense as well. Like I said, if Lindholm doesn't play, if there's any injuries down the line, Shea Theodore said that he's going to look to make the team out of camp. Brandon Montour, like we mentioned before, too, is an interesting one. And even some of the other guys we brought in, too, like Nate Ginnon and Jeff Schultz, those are guys who could come up and be a 7th or 6th guy if there's any injuries. So, there's going to have to be spots. And Murray might have a little bit of if he gets some sign, he might have a little bit more leeway in who he chooses to bring up. But if there's a lot of holes on the roster come opening night, some of these guys are going to have to step up and play more minutes than we would have expected from them.
Yeah, and speaking of Lindholm and Rakell, there was a little bit of an update that came out over the weekend. You had, Bob McKenzie from TSN said that Lindholm is not close to being re-signed, which, is not the news. Obviously, I know you're listening to, right now, if you didn't read the article we put out and you're listening to this now, you're going, great, thanks for that news. But it seems the issue, and of course, this is the issue that contracts almost always come down to, is money. But the issue is trying to find a common ground, Eddie. And I know that we covered this before, but it seems like the issue is you have guys like Seth Jones and Morgan Riley that are making, 5.4 and $5 million a year. And then you've got people on the high end like Aaron Ekblad that are $7.5 million. So it seems like from what McKenzie is saying is that they're trying to find somewhere in the middle there for Lindholm. But it just seems like it's going to be tough because it's taken so long this far. I mean, obviously, it's things aren't working out, and I've confirmed that too with a couple different sources from the Ducks as well, and that includes Rakell as well. It hasn't been getting done. So, some people ask, "Are you kind of worried about this?" And right now, Eddie, I have to say yes. I mean, the season's upon us, and both these guys aren't signed. I mean, I'm concerned. What do you think about Rakell and Lindholm?
Yeah, I wasn't as worried until the recent news came out about Jacob Trouba and him asking for a trade because deals aren't going well in Winnipeg, and that's a similar situation to what Lindholm's in. I think if he had have signed a contract, we'd be comparing what he had in with Seth Jones and Morgan Riley and Aaron Ekblad to what Lindholm could get. So it's a really comparable situation in their ages and the type of impact they have and the type of players that they are. So it's interesting to see that come out of Winnipeg. His reasoning was that he doesn't think he has the opportunities to be a top defenseman in that. Obviously, he's got Dustin Byfuglien and some other guys in front of him as well. But, they expected him to play a big role for them this season. He played a pretty big role for them last season. So, it adds some more worry to the situation now that that's a possibility. Not saying that Lindholm or Rakell will request for trades, but having such a disparity between, say, Ekblad's contract and Seth Jones, you've got $2 million in cap space, in comparing the two contracts. So if he's going to sit anywhere around in there, that's a lot of wiggle room for either team or player or agent to work around. So, I mean, we all expect him to make around what Riley and Seth Jones make, around 5.5, but then he has that reference point now with Ekblad at 7.5, where from what has come out around with Trouba is what he's expecting to get around $7 million, and I'm sure at one point you would have to say Lindholm probably and his agent asked for something similar. So that's what I would expect to why contracts are taking so long, and the difference in price that the agent and the player think that they deserve and that the team would like to sign them around, and I think that's why it's taking so long. I think the Rakell situation is a little bit different because as a forward, and the issues seemed around the league and around with the Ducks seemed to be revolving around defense. But as a forward, I thought this deal was a lot easier to get done. I think it was either going to be a bridge deal or sign him for around $4 or $5 million at tops, and that would be it. But I think with the issues with Lindholm's contract, I think that adds into how long it's going to take Rakell to get signed. And I think we talked about how each deal kind of relies on the other one to get done. So I think they kind of have to figure out one price before they can figure out the other one.
Yeah, I agree. And, there's a lot of, people out there that are very critical of the GM, Bob Murray. And, they get upset with him about these deals not getting done. And, I don't like playing the blame game. I don't like pointing fingers at anybody. And, I actually had the opportunity recently, a couple weeks ago, to talk to Bob Murray in person for about 10 or 15 minutes. And I talked to him about both these situations. And from what he told me is that he made quote unquote fair offers to both these players. Now, as far as what that means in terms of dollars and cents, I don't know. He didn't want to tell me. I'm not going to push the issue and ask him. But he said he made fair offers to both these players. And another issue that comes up when you look at the Lindholm situation, you mentioned it, it's his agent, Claude Lemieux. I talked to Murray about this. I asked him, I go, is Claude Lemieux, part of the problem? Trying to get this done. I mean, he's a new agent. He's trying to get everything done. And Murray's response was pretty, reserved. But he had told me that, the way Claude Lemieux does things is quote unquote different as opposed to other agents. So, right there that that's part of, obviously part of the issue on that side. And it takes two to make these deals and get them done. So when people look at Murray and they give a lot of heat on him, don't forget, you've got Lemieux as the agent over here trying to push a deal. And I mean, obviously that's his job. He's trying to make the best deal for his player, of course. But you hear this back and forth. It's a big issue with Lindholm. Looking over at Rakell, the other issue, Eddie, now is the fact that he is, injured and resting. I mean, he went to the World Cup of Hockey. We don't think he got injured from skating on the ice or whatever. We don't really know for sure. But what happened is from his appendectomy, I'm not a doctor of science, but basically what happens is sometimes the intestines can get formed a little wrong and there's a blockage, and that's basically what happened. So he was in some serious pain and had to have that fixed. But, we don't even know if Rakell can even play by the opening day. I mean, he said that's his goal, but we don't even know. So that is an unfortunate thing on his side because he, is looking to get a deal done. Now he has that issue and he's not even 100% ready. And he's got to rest up now, didn't even play in the tournament. So it's a tenuous situation for both of them, Eddie. I just tell people, though, I get it when you want to get upset at the general manager. I totally understand that. But just don't forget it. There's two sides to each of these agreements, and they gotta find a middle ground somehow.
Yeah, for sure. And like I mentioned before, the issue is the disparity in the contracts that you have to compare it to. I mean, it all comes down to how valuable is a player to the team and his impact to the team and what the team can pay. I mean, the Ducks have $7.5 million in cap space. They can't afford to pay Lindholm $6 or $7 million. They just can't afford to do it if they want to sign Rakell at the same time. And then that's not saying that he's not worth 7.5, but I think there's a reason why the Panthers signed Aaron Ekblad to a $7.5 million deal, because they don't really have any other defensemen at that quality for them right now and that are making that big of an impact with their team. They traded Dmitry Kulikov to the Sabres to free up room to sign Ekblad to that kind of deal, and I think that's kind of a one-off thing. I mean, he drafted first overall. He's a generational player on defense, and especially for that organization. He's a right-handed shot, which it doesn't always come into contract prices, but I think they're harder to come by, so I think that goes into it as well. And really looking at Morgan Rielly and Seth Jones, I think that's where his value should be, around $5.5 million. And you even look at Vatanin's contract as well, which is under $5 million. I mean, Vatanen has more of an offensive impact to the game. Obviously, Lindholm is a better all-around defenseman, but does he really deserve $2 or $3 million more than Vatanen makes? I don't think many people would say he does. When you say, Murray offered him what he thinks is fair, you would expect that to be around that range. But, of course, the player and the agent are always going to try and get the best for the player. And that's going to create issues with the contract. I think we're all surprised it's taken this long and that's still going on, and that we might start this season with both of them not having any contracts. I don't think anybody thought it was going to take that long. But, hopefully, I think all we can hope for now is that things start to develop fast and we don't go the same route that the Winnipeg Jets and Jacob Trouba went.
That's another fan question. We had Marcos Aguilar. He asks, are the Ducks going to trade either one of these players? And I mean, it's a possibility. They both haven't requested to be traded yet. That hasn't come out, like you said, with Trouba and the Winnipeg Jets scenario. The Ducks have been mentioned in trade rumors with Trouba, but Trouba's another defenseman. So, that's kind of an interesting situation. I don't know if the Ducks would try to send Fowler over there. Obviously Fowler's been the one that's been rumored for a long time. Nothing happened. I don't know if Lindholm is one that they would try to make a move for. It's interesting because, like you said, with the cap space right now at 7.5 million, it's tough to sign both of these guys. It's gonna be hard. I mean, if you could sign Lindholm at 5 and Rakell at between the 2 and 3 range, it would work out. But I mean, you're going right up to the cap, which the team doesn't usually do that. That's not what the Samuels usually do. But they're kind of in a position where they're going to have to do that this year. So I would like for them to sign both, but I still don't think a trade's out of the question, Eddie. It's just going to be a matter of if the Ducks are going to trade Lindholm and try and get a huge return, or are they going to try and trade one of the other defensemen, because that's what they're going to have to do in order to make cap room and also fill some of these forward spots.
Yeah, and it might be an interesting trade. I don't think they trade 1-for-1 Fowler or Lindholm for Trouba. I don't think it makes sense for them. We've got Bieksa and Manson and Vatanen down the right with Montour. Everybody expecting to be ready, not this season, but next season, and probably place, some significant time, maybe close to what Theodore played last year, so 15 to 20 games. But yeah, if we could see something that you don't see often, and I saw a lot of people mentioning this on Twitter, and that's like a 3-team trade, something that. I don't remember the last time we saw anything like that, but it's rumored that Winnipeg is looking for a comparable left shot defenseman, so a younger left shot defenseman, in comparison to Jacob Trouba. You could see something like the Ducks, obviously, who are abundant on that side. They could send Fowler or Lindholm over to Winnipeg, receive Trouba in return, and then quickly move Trouba to a different team. Say, I don't know, the Edmonton Oilers have been rumored, the Boston Bruins, the Buffalo Sabres, the Detroit Red Wings. Send Trouba over to another team for a forward, and that's obviously what we've been looking for. And I think they can definitely afford to move a defenseman. I think most of us would hope it's not Hampus Lindholm. But in any way, do we move Fowler for Trouba and then that's it and keep them? I don't think so. You bring in a guy like Trouba, who is also a restricted free agent, then you have you do move out Fowler's contract, but then you have 3 guys to sign, and you've only got $11 million in cap space. So I don't think that is an option, but we could see a 3-player trade. And, it doesn't happen often, but in a situation like this, where there's going to be multiple teams who need different things, I think it's definitely an option.
Yeah, and it would be interesting, like you said. I don't remember when there's been the last trade involving 3 teams, but with the way things are going right now, it's going to be interesting to see if Rakell or Lindholm request a trade, because the other part of this thing is if they don't play by December, Eddie, and things don't get done, then they're done for the season. They're not going to be able to play. So that's the thing. There's kind of a ticking, not necessarily a time bomb, but there's a ticking clock here that they got to get this figured out before December. So, they can try and hold out if they want, if that's what their plan is. I don't know about that. I haven't talked to either one of them, but if they're going to, play this waiting game, it's kind of a disadvantage to both of them because they're not playing, they're not helping the team, they're not making money. They're kind of in limbo. So, I would hope that, Lindholm and Rakell would either get deals done or then, if not, do request a trade, at least get some resolution to the situation. Obviously, I don't want them traded. I'd rather the Ducks keep both of these guys. And, that's, kind of leads to another fan question from Mike Davis. He asked, are you panicked, about the Ducks roster? And that kind of goes into other questions we've had about, the team's chances this year and whatnot. And to be honest, I am, Eddie. If the Ducks don't have Lindholm and Rakell on this team, the Ducks are going to be a good team. They're going to go far. They're going to do decent. We've talked about they're probably still going to be in the top 3 in the division, we hope. But without Lindholm and Rakell, as far as the Ducks going deep in the playoffs and being a Stanley Cup favorite, I'm sorry, they're not. They need these guys, or they need to trade and get something comparable, or something. They got to do something, because these 2 guys are very good players, and they're extremely important for the Ducks. Lindholm on the defense, of course, and Rakell being a top six, forward or he can be wing or center. So that's another bonus with him. So we're usually positive about everything with the Ducks and whatnot, but we're also objective here, and they got to get these guys signed or traded or figured out somehow, Eddie, in order for the Ducks to have another serious run at the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, because if you go into the season with these issues, you're banking on that a lot of other guys can step up. If Rakell and Lindholm aren't signed and they opt not to play at the start of the season, you're asking guys like Shea Theodore to come up and play a significant role and really fill Lindholm's shoes until either he gets signed or gets traded. We all think he could do that, but that's a lot to ask from a player right off the beginning of the season and rely on him and then really no reliable backup to that if something was to happen to him or if he wasn't playing well. And the same thing goes for Rakell. You're asking guys like Nick Ritchie and Stefan Nason and even to new guys like Antoine Vermette and Mason Raymond to produce at a significantly higher level than that would be expected from them at the beginning of the season if he isn't there to play in. And really nobody is going to none of those guys are going to replace the creativity that Rakell would bring to the lineup, but you're asking a lot of those guys to step up and maybe more than they would have at the beginning of the season. So it is an issue, and like you said, we're not asking for a trade, and we would love to have both of these guys back, without having to trade them. But if it doesn't get resolved by the start of the season and they can't play, it's going to really hurt the Ducks' chances early on. They can't get off to a bad start like they did last year. They have to get off to a good start, and it's always nice to have the locker room set for the season at the become the first game. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with it. I honestly hope they both do get signed. If not before the start of the season, within a couple weeks of the start of the season. But with the whole Trouba thing coming out now, it kind of throws a wrench into that. We really don't know what's going to happen, and it's going to be a tense couple weeks coming up for Ducks fans, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's not the news obviously everybody wants to hear. I mean, the flip side, the good thing is, there's opportunities for these younger guys, as we mentioned earlier, to come up and step into some roles and play better. It also gives, like you said, Mason Raymond a chance to, maybe play top six role, Nick Ritchie to play a top six role, more of the forwards, Nason, Sarbosa, if Cordelius gets better, he can come up there, a chance. So there may be some names that you're not necessarily familiar with come opening night. And I mean, we'll most likely have a podcast next week and we'll cover all that and bring in all the updates. But as of right now, as we talked about in the article, it's up in the air as far as the Ducks roster and the lineups and how it's all going to pan out. It's going to be interesting. We're going to watch, those preseason games are going to be coming up tonight and this week, and we'll see how they go. As far as the NHL, there hasn't been too much news around the league. I mean, obviously everybody's been focused on the World Cup of Hockey, of course. But we did have one big signing. You had Marchand getting his deal, done for 8 years and $49 million. And I thought it was a little interesting, this deal. It seemed like he maybe took a little bit of a pay cut, Eddie. I mean, maybe he could have got a little bit more money. What do you think on this deal?
Yeah, I think 6.12 is the annual average value for his contract over 8 years, and I think it is a long-term contract. He is pretty young. I mean, he's on Team Canada this year. It looks like his career is trending upwards, and he's come a long way from being just a pest player to scoring over 30 goals last year and really breaking out and having a career year last year. So if he can do that every season, I mean, they're getting a steal at just over $6 million. It's hard to say with a player like Marchand. He's always going to be a good player, and I think he's always going to be worth that $6 million. But I think, if he can continue to score 25, 30 goals a season, I mean, they've got a good value here, and he probably has taken a pay cut to stay in Boston and play with Bergeron and Krejci and now Backes and actually, contend for a playoff spot this year. So I think they've definitely gotten a good deal with him. And, looking at some of the comments that he said, too, is he said Boston's become his second home. He loves it there. He's excited what's ahead for the team. So it looks like, he definitely wants to spend his whole career there and may have taken a pay cut just to do so.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think he did take a little bit of a pay cut. Maybe he could have got a little bit more. But, if that's where you want to be and the organization treats you right, That's a good thing. That's a good deal for him. So, I'm happy for him, and I think he'll do pretty good. Like you said, he's been doing, better on the offense and not just, run around being an agitator. So, good deal for him, hopefully all the way around. And I guess the only other news, kind of interesting news around the league is the Edmonton Oilers. They kind of had an interesting mascot, Eddie. They decided to go with this Lynx mascot, and wow, the social media response wasn't too great, Eddie.
No, I mean, it was kind of a nightmare for their PR team on social media. It just got like shut down automatically right when it got released. I don't know how it got through everybody. I don't know how everybody in the Oilers organization okayed this and said, yeah, this is probably the best bet for our mascot because it's a frightening mascot. I mean, it looks like you would buy it for Halloween and wear it out on and that would be it. But I mean, it's something that they said they've taken some time and they've asked kids around the area and had a lot of thought put into it, and they came up with Hunter the Lynx for their mascot. I still don't get the whole thing with some teams, and they have mascots and they have nothing to really do with the team and the team name themselves. I mean, it's the Edmonton Oilers and you have a Lynx as your mascot. I saw a recommendation on Twitter where they could have just had an oil drop named Slick, and that would have been a lot more appropriate and probably a lot less frightening if they're going to go that way. I mean, it would make more sense for the team because it's the Edmonton Oilers. In some cases it makes a little bit of sense. The Montreal Canadiens, it's kind of hard to generalize what a Canadian is. They do have a giant green alien, which still doesn't make any sense, but the mascots always just amaze me. It's just funny with social media nowadays and how quickly something like this can backfire on you. I saw the hashtag MethCat was trending yesterday, talking about the mascot. So I mean, this quickly backfired on them. I'm pretty sure they're stuck with it now, so they're gonna have to weather the storm and just kind of go with it. But yeah, from what the general reaction from the public and the people on Twitter was that it was a pretty frightening mascot.
Well, what's funny is some of the older Duck fans will remember this back in the Mighty Ducks days. Wild Wing actually wasn't the original mascot of the Ducks. If you go back, it was the Iceman, and they had this guy that was in all silver, dressed up out there, riding the Zamboni and all the stuff in the beginning. And I mean, of course, this is back in '93, like you were talking about before all this, social media craze, obviously, and there was some serious backlash to that one. Because the Iceman cometh and the Iceman left. I mean, he was only there for the one game and he was done. I mean, because a lot of people didn't like it. I remember people were booing. They thought it was, a lame idea, and he was done. And it was kind of the same thing like you were saying, Eddie, though. It's like, I mean, you're the Ducks and you have a guy dressed in a silver suit saying he's the Iceman. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, that has nothing to do with the Ducks. So the Ducks got it right, obviously, when they got Wild Wing. And if you remember when they brought him out, he didn't have a name at first, and they had a contest, and which they've done with a lot of things. They're doing it now with I saw they posted something about a new drink or something they're having. They're having a contest for that too. But they did a contest, and one of the fans named a Wild Wing, and the Ducks got it right with their mascot. So thankfully they did. But yeah, the situation with the Oilers, I mean, I don't know if they didn't do any surveys or they didn't, ask people outside the organization. I mean, I don't know what their process was in doing this, but I've only seen maybe one or two positive comments, unfortunately, Eddie. And if they're going to stick with that, I don't know. They're going to have to try and, I don't know, figure something out because, like you said, it's like, I mean, Halloween's around the corner, but I don't know how that's going to pan out. I mean, I think the oil slick one's a really good idea.
Yeah, I think kudos to the Oilers social media guy for weathering the storm yesterday. All the tweets I saw about him were trying to be positive about the situation, ignoring all the negative tweets coming in. But I mean, it was just a nightmare. I mean, it just blew up so fast too. I remember seeing a picture of it. Before they released it as the Oilers mascot, and I saw the picture of the Lynx, and I wasn't sure what it was for. I was just scrolling through Twitter, and then obviously a couple minutes later, about a half an hour later, I see the Edmonton Oilers tweet about their first ever mascot Hunter, and then right from there on it just caught on and went south so fast. So I mean, kudos to him for being able to weather that. But yeah, I mean, they said they went to schools, they had kids vote, they had a bunch of people vote, but I mean, obviously not when you look at the negative, negative outlook that everybody's had on it. So I'm sure they'll have to keep it now. But I don't know how long Hunter the Lynx is going to last as the Oilers mascot.
Yeah, like I told you, the Iceman only lasted, not even really a game, but basically one game with the Ducks. So let's see what the Oilers will do. But with that, I mean, we're pretty much going to wrap up the show. It's a new season, and we're giving away a lot of stuff. We have our contest that we're doing on here for the opening night tickets, where we give away the key. We mentioned a keyword at the end of each show. If you go back to the last show, we gave up the first word. In this show, the word is Anaheim. So make sure you write that word down, Anaheim. Go back, listen to the last one if you haven't heard what the other word was there. And basically, the next couple shows, we'll announce certain words. They come up with a key phrase, and then we'll ask you to email us the phrase, and we just randomly pick a winner. So we're doing that for the home opener. And we have some tickets for the preseason games, and we're giving away those as well on social media, on Twitter and Facebook. So look for those. There's, I believe, 3 of the games that we have tickets for that we're giving away. So we'll be doing that, and we'll have more contests and more things to give away throughout the season. And, looking forward to hopefully getting Lindholm and Rakell signed and the start of the season to get going here pretty soon. So let's go Ducks.